All of the tunnels are underground, where none of the children will ever be found. They wandered away to join the show and lost their way in the world below. They joined the circus and left their town. Now they live here down with the clown.
Beware, spoiler phobes! You have stumbled into a storm of spoilers, a podcast covering the adaptation of Stephen King's It, that is Welcome to Derry on HBO. This podcast is usually split into two sections, the calm and the storm, because there are usually future episodes that we don't want to spoil. However, after the airing of the 8th episode of Welcome to Derry Chapter 1 on HBO titled Winter Fire, there's no more Welcome to Derry to spoil, so all hands on deck in the Citadel of Crazy Town as we look at the concluding episode and speculate just where and when this tale will take us, should further chapters of It be greenlit. We will have a second section of the podcast where Neil and I will pick some of our favorite things of the season, because we're not spoiling, we're enriching. Why, hello again. I am Dave Gonzalez, and I've read the book by Stephen King.
And I'm Neil Miller, and I have not read the book by Stephen King, but even I know there could have been more turtle stuff. And welcome back again to a storm of spoilers. Quick housekeeping before we get into this season finale of Welcome to Derry. Next week, we will return for a very special 2025 year-end wrap-up for Storm of Spoilers, where, you know, we're going to talk about some fun stuff. We're talk about what we did this year and look ahead, of course, to next year, which is going to kick off in January after a couple weeks off for this particular podcast with A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Mark your calendars. We will be back in early January to preview it and then cover it week to week. And we've got all kinds of fun plans for 2026. If you would like to watch this podcast in visual form, you can get us over on YouTube, youtube.com/@DaveandNeil, Da7e and Neil, for video versions of the podcast. That is also something that will continue as we get back into our next Westeros era. There's going to be 2 of those next year. I'm kind of excited because House of the Dragon is also coming back. Anyway, and if you would like more from Dave and I, you can join us and support us over at patreon.com/DaveandNeil to access bonus content from all of the projects we've done on this feed, all the way back to our original Game of Thrones era and our Lost project. And you get all kinds of brand new content, including our weekly adventure pod. December is our 2025 recap series. This past week, we did our 10 essential movies of the year. Next week, we are doing, or this coming week, we're doing our year-end superlatives. And then we'll have a year-end mailbag, which is going to be a lot of fun. So join us over there. That's the best way to support both this podcast and our work in general. You can also, if you subscribe at the small council level or above, get our Hannibal Rewatch podcast, which just kicked off season 3 of Hannibal, which as of right now is the final season of that show, but who knows if we'll get more of that in the future. We also have done rewatch projects of Twin Peaks and The Leftovers. All good stuff. Jump over to the Patreon. It's great. All right, back to this Storm of Spoilers pod. You can get in touch with this show by sending us a raven, stormofspoilers@gmail.com. Someone did this week with lots of questions that we are going to address and answer. It's going to be fun. You can also review us on Apple Podcasts or leave us comments on Spotify. Leave us 5-star reviews. Say whatever you want. This week, Dave, we got a review from Matt, who followed the instructions to a T and just wrote anything you want in the review field. So
Nice.
That, I think, is the most literal interpretation of what we're looking for there. Matt did put all 5 stars in the review, which we appreciate. So great job following instructions. Keep those reviews coming here as we get to the end of the year and beyond. That'll help folks find us, because you know that we are going to be an essential resource for folks looking for Westeros content. All right, Dave, I think that's all I have for housekeeping. Let's move into the calm.
Yeah, that's right. We're going into a calm for a series that has came out of a book that is finished while we're talking about Westeros. It is interesting that we've transitioned back to literary adaptations on the things that may change as we're going on. But I did want to start I like starting with this listener email from Casey, because this episode of Welcome to Derry takes some big swings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in order to fit all of those big swings into television, it does some interesting television storytelling. I'll let Casey recap some of these points. They write, why did an old tree all of a sudden become the natural delivery address for the magic dagger? It's a cool set piece, but why bring it there instead of just replacing the destroyed shard? We see a map with locations of the buried shards serving as sorts of fence posts to contain it. We watch the military dig one up and destroy it, freeing it. Why aren't we returning it there instead of the tree? Do the kids know this stone is a dagger somehow? They refer to it as a dagger on their milk truck chase. The dagger can sometimes repel, perhaps kill it, but it also wants to return to it. It infects the wielder's minds like a Horcrux, but the tribe who watched over it were unaffected. The dagger also wants to return somewhere else, specifically not to the base of this old tree, but where? Just back to it, and it charges toward the only weapon that could harm it. This is all so we can set a confrontation over a frozen river with a cool tree in the distance, a sheet of ice where hardly anyone slips and slides, including a delivery van that comes to a quick stop instead of mowing down children. Bad soldiers somehow knew to show up here. Did it tell them? Because our good soldiers had to drug Halloran for the shine to show him where to go just in time. Bad soldiers shoot and wound Hanlon to get the magic dagger. Then they call a ceasefire and allow a team huddle with Hanlon, his son and friends, hands off the magic dagger to a gang of kids who continue walking to the same destination across the ice. Is the fog thicker now somehow, even though the Halloran has it trapped in a memory at this point? Hanlon and a team overpowered the bad soldiers and take their weapons. Hanlon keeps shooting it in the head, popping it and slowing it down. It's his compatriots just watch, rifles in hand, until he's out of ammo. Then his wife drops her rifle and others fire on it. Now, a moment later, the bullets have no effect. It charges to stop the kids from reaching the tree, an event that has never happened before, yet it knows this is a consequential showdown. Am I being too picky? Do I need to look at things differently? Or is this just the type of storytelling I need to get on board with if I'm going to enjoy Stephen King shows?
What a question there at the end.
It is. Did you watch Castle Rock, Neil, when it was on Hulu?
I watched some of Castle Rock. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember a whole lot of Castle Rock, other than that it was mishmashing all of the Stephen King things together.
Mm-hmm. And it was the first season had a similarly timey-wimey showdown that involved Bill Skarsgård. But it is sort of this ending question that Casey has. Is this what I need to appreciate if I'm going to enjoy Stephen King shows? The answer might be maybe. When this finale was happening to me, I thought this is how you build like a finale to something that has frequently been, I think, anticlimactic in other adaptations, because we've talked about this in the book. There's this whole metaphysical aspect. Mm-hmm. It is not super visual. And in every adaptation of it, be it the cinematic one or the television one, they have to sort of dumb it down to make it more of a showdown. And so all of this has all of the hallmarks of evolved cinematic first storytelling. And when the Inside episode 8 aired after the episode, and Andy Muschietti basically started it with being like, well, we needed a location, and we needed like a race to that location, and we needed like a ticking clock in order for like the race to have like any sort of meaning. He's literally building the story in reverse. So that's the answer to the tree, to why the fog is inconsistently thick, to all these sort of different things.
Sure. And also, I guess the tree and the river are a slightly more interesting location than the middle of a field, which is where they dug up that pillar. I guess.
Right. And it's like otherwise they'd be racing towards a hole instead of racing towards a tree. And it seems like the whole fog idea is sort of born out of not only is there something sort of preceding Pennywise and that it is maybe related to the fog of the mist that is, sort of a leak out of this other dimension, but also practically it allows you to shoot a lot of stuff on stages and then just sort of fog it wherever you need it to be eventually. And it looks like from the behind the scenes footage that Bill Skarsgård was around, at least providing reference to all the different shapes he takes in the fog. So I don't know if they saved themselves much budget in terms of doing that, but it does look like they conserved the budget to make the clown look good, and then also sort of turn this fog into a silhouette machine as like a way of storytelling, which is interesting. But I could also see the sort of problematic nature of it in your essentially staging a bunch of scenes that should take place geographically a little bit further or closer from each other. But just being like, oh, the fog's there, so therefore we could selectively see or not see things. Of all the things that Casey mentioned, the only one that like really bothered me while it was happening is that, yes, the military like advances through the fog and somehow doesn't see Hanlon hand off the dagger to his kids, to the kids, and be like, go over that way.
Sure. The dagger, the thing that glows in the fog.
Right. The thing that like should be very easy to spot in the fog. And I guess like the military doesn't know anything about the dagger. We talked about this last week, how the people with the knowledge of what the dagger was and the people who had the dagger were sort of different. And this episode really doubles down on Rose to sort of give us a whole bunch of dagger lore, basically making it, yes, like a Horcrux or the One Ring, or this idea that sort of like it wants to return to where it is. I'm a little bit more okay with that because I don't think that goes against anything that we've seen necessarily. And then also all of these times that they're threatening it with the dagger. So very specifically, Ronnie has it as like it's sort of like dashing around and laughing at them in the fog. And she's sort of like pointing it. It doesn't ward him off. It doesn't freeze him like it did with Lily. And then I was also saying with Lily in the sewer, she also had the turtle charm up. And then here, right after it freezes when Dick, I guess, stops it. But when it's about to eat Marge, the next shot is of the little boy in the turtle costume sort of like crashing to the ground. So I think the dagger is that very special kind of MacGuffin that works like it needs to. And this leads to the core problem that I think Casey has, which is it, the novel, and it, the storytelling universe, is so wide in its scope to have like a macroverse, to have fear as a weapon, to have love as a counter weapon, and to have like belief be the thing that we're trading in, is that the actual rules don't matter as much as we believe that it matters. That's why it rushes at the kids with like the dagger thing, is because everybody believes this is going to work. And so in theory, it doesn't break the rules if it works. So it's weird. And at least in terms of how they did it, chapter 2, I thought they used it too broadly. I think the insulting of a clown down to small size and then ripping out of its heart is sort of not as big as the idea of belief in love versus fear and an extra dimensional being could be. I think the series is taking a bit more of a step at it, but also it's a big flashy lore show and is just loving this moment of winged Pennywise descending on all of the children with a ghost rich. It's just like throwing everything at the screen to try to make a climactic moment, which is a way to approach it. If you're going to have a giant spider Pennywise in like your movie as well.
Yeah. And I think it mostly works, but I do think they got themselves in a little bit of trouble with the fog. and setting it all within the fog, especially given the problems they had in the cemetery scene in the earlier episode, where it was like, all right, a lot of this looks like it's just them riding a bike on a stage. And I do think this is one of the examples of the show finally looking like it's running on a TV show budget. And it was almost like this weird whiplash going from these shots that are clearly like TV budget, digital fog, character, actors on a stage, as Casey rightly points out, not on ice because they're not like slipping and sliding around. And then it'll cut back to like the Pennywise stuff, which looks incredible, right? Both as practical effects and the Pennywise digital effects. So it's like they just put all the money over here, and then they kind of had to figure out what they're going to do with the live action human characters in the fog. And I do think it gets a little murky, and the logistics of it, the geography of the sequence is a little wonky. And yeah, it raises a lot of weird questions that I guess ultimately get answered by it was just convenient for the plot. Like, it was convenient. And as you rightly point out, if you're working backward from the big climactic moment where the kids push the dagger into the ground and, Pennywise gets flashbanged, then this is kind of what you have to do. You're going to end up with some questions that are unanswerable or some dangling threads. So I think it's a bit of a mixed bag, but I don't think that the problems I had with this finale episode negate the fact that this was a pretty successful season of television.
Yeah, I think the finale episode has some of the over plotting that occasionally comes with finale episodes, but just like I could see where the ideas that they wanted to execute then accidentally made other ideas dumber. Like, I don't know why it's on the river. If you're not going to make it slippery, then why are we there? Like, you could have a tree raising out of the embankment of anything. It would have been especially interesting to set it in somewhere like the Barrens, or like a setting from the first movie, or some such thing. That could have been like a throwback, but they decided at some point to set all of this on the river. Maybe so, it's going to sound dumb, but it's like just setting things on desert planets. You just have a flat surface. Like, you're just choreographing everything on a flat surface. And you're like, well, what flat surfaces exist? It's like ice, I guess,
Well, and I think that's part of the problem is, like, by setting it out kind of in the middle of nothing on this river, there's less geography around them to render as digital effects, but also there's less geography around them for the audience to know where they are at any one particular time. So it's like, if they would have set this in a neighborhood, then all of your shots would have had been very meticulously planned to make sure that, like, if they're standing in front of House A is in the shot when you're looking at certain characters. So I think it's like, you kind of clear out the 3D space, and it allows you to not have to worry about rendering anything but like random trees kind of covered up in fog, which is, again, it's the shortcut that you use because you're operating on a television budget and not necessarily the movie budget. But I don't necessarily think that is a good excuse.
I think the fun storytelling thing that they do in this episode, as opposed to the layering on of plot, is sort of how they look at Pennywise as a sort of fourth dimensional being. And the sort of climax of this episode isn't, it is definitely the dagger going in, but sort of the recognition that this is a sequel series for us and Pennywise, potentially. Meaning that all the fun canon things we were saying were rules may not be rules anymore. It has been fun, Neil, to cover things like Hannibal, which is dealing with differences in adaptation canon, or things like The Leftovers or Watchmen, which are dealing with another state of being where maybe time doesn't mean anything to you past a certain point. To have it sort of enter that space and play around, I think is the most interesting thing for me for this finale in justifying why this series should continue to exist and why it could be exciting for this series to exist. The fourth dimensionality sort of allows for, I guess, what I would call sort of like a layering of characters as we're going backwards, especially with the title at the end being revealed as Welcome to Derry Chapter 1, much like they did in It Chapter 1. The Chapter 1 wasn't added until the end title. But now it's really fun because like you and I speculated in the Storm last episode, this finale episode was our sort of only time to connect to It, the movies, we thought.
Sure.
Directly. And they certainly did a lot of that this episode, but while also saying we could make further connections down the line and sort of justify why we're still connected to the movies as well as being our own thing. Very specifically, how did like all the Marge stuff happen or play for you?
I mean,
because she sort of took the lead, I think, for these final two episodes.
Yeah, I really like the Marge stuff. I think Matilda Lawler, who plays Marge, just really shines in this episode and gives a really fun performance. And you see, I think for the first time, and this is really more about the show letting this happen, you see the character of Richie sort of come out of her. Right. Like when you think about
kill this fucking clown.
Yeah. When you think about Finn Wolfhard's performance as Richie in It Chapter 1, this now does feel like the person who grows up to be his mom, this foul mouthed little girl. And I think that's great. And I always love it when a good theory pays off, because this is a theory that emerged very early on in the season. And I think that the Marge and Rich arc, especially here in these last few episodes, is some of the best stuff that this show did. So I think it works really well. I think, of course they had to do this scene at the end with Pennywise where he spells it all out for the audience, just in case anybody wasn't paying attention. He literally pulls out a picture of Richie, which is fine, I guess. We don't want to lose anybody along the way, even though some of us knew what was happening there. But I think that's really fun. And I like this idea of Pennywise as, this narrative device of Pennywise being a fourth dimensional being and being able to experience time back and forth, because it opens up avenues where as if they go on to seasons 2 and 3, and we're going further back in time, it allows for this situation where Pennywise could be messing with, these families on a generational level, right? Like, is there something, for example, in the 1935 story that we may experience in season 2 that leads to what happens to Bev's mom? Or is Pennywise going to be messing with someone in the Tozier family, that ends up being Richie's grandfather or great-grand, I don't know, whatever that works out to, in 1935, right? So I think that there's, and we know specifically, even in the opening credits of this, when we see the shot of the shootout, the gang shootout, that's supposed to be the augury of 1935, there is a store on Main Street that is Bowers something. So it's how long has Pennywise been messing with the Bowers family, for instance? And this idea that if Pennywise is experiencing it all together, he could be creating intergenerational traumas that he's trying to kind of mess with the timeline. And I think that's really fun. And I think that this is a really good entry point to introduce that as a concept, because I feel like it only gets stickier as we go back further in time.
And I think they reintroduce it from the book, because that's definitely sort of one of the overarching messages of the book is you face down this pure fear as a child, and then sort of it affects you in a way that you have to reface it as an adult. So this idea of sort of like a generational trauma is sort of reestablishing what the book does when like adaptations often have to focus on kids versus evil clown and not necessarily the meaning of it. It is like a reintroduction to that. My first thought was, oh, if it's going back in time, then like if it's going back in time and it is confined to Derry, then it can attack anybody who has to do with any generation of losers anywhere up and down the timeline. So just because we don't have any, you know, Stutter and Bill Denbrough family in Derry right now doesn't mean there weren't any Denbroughs in Derry in 1935.
Sure.
And so like that takes it back.
The other one that I thought it was Lily's dad. Right? Because we know how he dies, but he would have been around as a kid in the 1930s. So like similar to the way we get Will and Ronnie in this episode is kind of like marked for doom later in the story. Could we see something like that with you know, I don't even know his first name, Mr. Bainbridge, in 1935, like being one of the losers and ultimately being marked to eventually die in a pickle factory?
Yeah, I would also say maybe maybe Lily's mom, because then there's a way to get the actress back.
Sure.
Just in a different season to play a generational version of the Bainbridges. But yeah, also you introduce the new characters in Welcome to Derry, like Rose, like General Shaw, but also these new losers. And if they mess with Pennywise anytime, they sort of enter this continuum. And it's fun because at least we talked about this in Twin Peaks when we were trying to decipher the Red Room. The idea of like there are certain space times where you just suddenly exist outside of time. And I want to run something by you and ask you if you think this is world building or production being very faithful to a little known actress. But Katie Lundman shows up in this episode, the actress, as a manifestation of Pennywise smiling in the window. She puts her hand to the window as the mist is rolling in. That actress was on wanted posters at the beginning of chapter 1 because she played Betty Ripsum, and then played Chris Unwin, one of the little homophobic shits that kills a person at the beginning of chapter 2. So the idea that it can now take its form because it has recaptured the soul of children, that also echoes back and forth. So like once a victim, always a victim of it, and it's capable to sort of like use your manifestation even if you are dead or have not been born.
Yeah. I mean, if this show had not spent so much time on the whole question of like what happened to Bob Gray and is Bob Gray still in there, I would say this is just like a fun little production Easter egg that they threw in there. But I now think that it's part of the lore, like lore building, that once Pennywise consumes you, he has part of you forever, right? And I guess we see that in the movies too, where it's like he still is able to manifest and like puppet a version of Georgie to taunt Bill, even though we know Georgie's been dead for a while by that point, you know? So I think that's pretty consistent with what we know to be Pennywise's powers, which is like, you know, he may eat the kids, but then there's still maybe part of them still in there. There's enough of Bob Gray inside Pennywise for Dick Halloran to be able to trap him in a Bob Gray like memory. So yeah. I think that is
how did that sequence read to you as somebody who hasn't like read the books, and like, I mean, it what did you think was happening at that moment?
It read to me as proof that Ingrid wasn't totally wrong to think that her father is like still inside the clown somewhere. Obviously we think her father is probably dead, and has been consumed by the clown, but I think that he absorbs part of their essence, I guess would be the easiest way to describe it. And he absorbs sort of their memories. And, this may be me watching too much Pluribus, but it's like Pennywise carries around with him all of the knowledge and memories of everybody he's ever eaten, essentially. And he can use that as part of, because I guess that makes sense, right? Because like as he's terrorizing children, he's getting into their minds and finding out what their fears are. So he can already sort of access your innermost thoughts and fears just by being in close proximity. So once he eats you, he gets even more access, I would assume. So that to me kind of proves out that whole idea that if Pennywise gets you, you're with him forever. Now, whatever your experience is, you're probably just dead, but Pennywise gets to keep part of you around to be useful later, whether it's being able to manifest your physical form or being able to just use the knowledge you had against your, descendants.
Yeah. I think it's like, for me, it read very book Ritual of Chud-ish, in that we finally got to see it face down with somebody who had a psychic power that knew it was fighting him.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like this idea that also if belief is a weapon, that you could maybe confuse Pennywise into thinking that it is human. Because in theory, that would also make it vulnerable to you. If you could be like, no, you are Bob Gray. You just had like this, flight of fancy.
Sure. Well, and if
it seems dumb to be able
believes hard enough that it is human, then maybe it will also believe that it can be killed.
Believe it could be killed. Somebody on one of the Welcome to Derry subreddits was unfamiliar with Dick Halloran's game. If it wasn't for the military, could have trapped Pennywise for all time.
Sure.
And I'm like, yeah, memory traps, man.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're dealing with like a belief based weapon system, it is very impressive. I also liked that they sort of provided some ways for you to understand what Dick Halloran was doing, because when we saw him invade Taniel's mind earlier, you see that he could sort of enter a memory but then talk to the being, and the way sort of Dick smiled and they framed him with that, it's also kind of terrifying while it's happening. So for him to enter its mind and find a door, and that door to have a Bob Gray memory in it, is to me like evidence of what you're saying, that it exists in some form there. I also like the idea that Richie shows up and is able to, not only sort of put his hands on his parents, but to help them with the dagger, where it's like Richie was a victim of the augury. He wasn't a victim of it.
Mm-hmm.
So his spirit gets to be like free, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen, a Black Phone-esque dead kids come to take revenge on it, because if it gets them, they're trapped inside it. They are part of this spiritual system of the dead, it appears.
Sure.
Which is an interesting way to sort of like use The Shining to maybe communicate a little bit of lore about who or who is not trapped inside of it. But also we get to see Rich's parents right at the end there. So I was like, are we not going to see Rich's parents? Because I think if we see them this first season, they are potential season 2 characters.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just the nature of a reverse storytelling aspect of it.
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess, although it sounds like Rich just moved to town not long ago, so maybe his parents are not as potentially prominent.
Yeah, it is possible. I imagine it's going to be harder for Cubans in the 30s Depression era.
It is
definitely.
It is going to be one of those weird things where the show might get a little bit less diverse as it goes on, because America was less diverse. But they could, of course, lean into more of the plight of the native peoples, which is going to be not fun to watch as well. So, but I do like this idea of like, and this would also, portend the show's interest in elevating to the more grand cosmic parts of the story, which I know we pined for all season. We pined for the turtle, and they teased us with the turtle, but we didn't get the turtle. But if what the show is communicating to us is that the children that are taken and eaten by it are trapped within it, and for just like Rich, if you're killed by like the augury, you are more of a freed spirit and are able to like roam around of your own free will, then that is the kind of level of power that explains why another cosmic being like the turtle god is even remotely interested in this conflict, right? Is keeping an eye on this entity at all, because that is the level of power that it wields. And when it says I'm an eater of worlds, it's kind of not kidding, like it really, really means it. And, this first season is there as an example of how close it came to eating our world.
Very, very true. I do want to talk about the turtle a little bit before returning to this episode. I think if we are moving in reverse, that is a perfect excuse for us to be more and more turtle-pilled, to be building towards a turtle.
Sure.
Because as I mentioned in the storm, I don't remember if I mentioned in the column before, but in the novel, Bill sees the turtle when he's a kid, and the turtle helps them. When they face it again and they're adults, by that point, the turtle has died. So when they destroy it, at that point, the turtle's dead. Which means, in theory, the turtle would be stronger the further back in time you go, which makes me think we still could be moving towards turtle. Also, as I mentioned, I think there's enough turtle imagery every single time something important happens to these kids that if you introduce the turtle as a future fourth dimensional thing,
sure,
we'll get to go back and rewatch episodes and be like, oh, the turtle was interfering there on our behalf.
Yeah. Well, and one of my big questions is, how did the indigenous people come to know about the root?
Mm-hmm.
The answer could be just they met the turtle, and the turtle.
I would love for that to happen.
Or they found the root, and
the
root helped them connect to the turtle. Either way, turtle.
We also get Daniel passes away by gunshot wound by the military.
R.I.P.
Which means he's not what a lot of people were, or what some people were suspecting, which is he was the part of the tribe outside of Derry that Mike visits in between chapter 1 and chapter 2. Which makes me wonder if we also could be going backwards to a ritual of Chud, which is just not mentioned here, despite the various new ceremonies we get downloaded from Rose, which is interesting to me.
Sure.
That we could still. So, like,
the root is the same thing that Mike says that he takes in chapter 2, right?
Yes, the Maturin root.
The Maturin root. So whoever he meets with has this similar knowledge. So even though it's not Rose or Daniel, it might still be the same people, because Rose is moving away at the end of this show, but not everybody's moving away. There's still all of the entire council that she had been meeting with all season, I assume, is still there.
Well, yes, and what we know, and then apparently in contact with the Hanlons now at the sheep farm, they're part of the Children of Maturin, I don't know, recruits or whatnot by the end of this. So it is possible it is still them. I'm just curious as to if we are going to build toward the ritual of Chud, and if so, if it plays out differently because we're going back through time in a different way. Should I have more hope in the ritual of Chud, which in chapter 2 just straight up doesn't work, and Mike was lying to them all along? Is it because it didn't work because they were just catching it at the wrong time through its ping-ponging between its arrival and its birth death?
Sure. Well, it'll be interesting to see, because the show did answer one of the questions that I think we were sort of weary about which is, are they going to make these pillars a rock solid, like rule that like they actually work or they don't work, or it's about belief? I feel like this finale definitively proves that they're very real and they very much do work as a cage.
Yeah. Yes. And so it cannot, be outside of Derry, which is interesting because that's different from the novel, but also the whole idea of it being a fourth dimensional being is hinted at the novel because it in the novels from the macroverse, and here in the subtitles when the pillars sort of explode, it says macroversal energy bubbling or whatever in the subtitles. So they are nodding towards that idea. But this whole like past, present, future idea, that comes a little bit more from what they added to it chapter 2, which is this idea that when Bev was in the deadlight, she could see the future, which is a new idea, especially because it was like possible futures. This idea of like sort of it knowing the future, knowing the past. So we are definitely dealing with like the Muschietti adaptation of what this being is at this point. And I do wonder if, as we go backwards, the lore is going to maybe undo some of the tension of this series, or if the cage always existed and that doesn't make it less scary within the cage.
Sure. Well, and it also makes me question of whether Bev's ability to see, potential futures was a Bev specific thing from seeing the deadlights, or if that happens to everyone who sees the deadlights. Because now at the end of this season, we have many, many people who survived, but also got hit with the deadlights, including Leroy. And, like every child in town. So,
yeah.
And Will.
Or maybe they forget, like, at least in the book, after like these huge augury events, people would like immediately start feeling better and forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
And there would almost be like a relentless turn towards positivity as a method of forgetting. So that could also be possible. I'm pretty happy also as a book reader at Marge's speech at the funeral, because that is pretty direct. That is a direct passage from the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like the friends worth dying for speech. So that was nice to get. But I do want to circle way back to something you were saying before, which is Ronnie's ending. We had suspected that, Ronnie could eventually become Will's partner, and that they both would give birth to Mike. Mm-hmm. But in order for that to happen, we also know that she would have to burn with Will, since we know that's how Mike's parents died. From It Chapter 1. So I just want to appreciate this tightrope they're walking, where we have this very fun ending where Ronnie gets away with her dad, which isn't supposed to happen based on the novel, where we definitely deal with Ronnie's body at one point. So it's like, hey, this character survived, but also Will's like, I'm going to write you, so hopefully you remember me. And I'm like, I'm in this great place where I would love for her to remember that her and Will have a connection, but also if that happens, then she becomes Mike's father and she dies horribly in a fire.
Mike's mom.
Yeah. Or father.
Yeah.
I don't know, to be fair.
I don't know how things
We're
work.
all making assumptions.
Yeah, no, that's the assumption that I make at the ending there, which is this is there to communicate to us that she and her dad moved to Canada for a time, and Will writes to her. She doesn't forget. She eventually comes back, and she and Will become Mike's parents and die horribly in a fire. And
we also, I put in our screenshots the paper that Pennywise taunts Mike with, that shows his parents dying, and the flames of the apartment building just spell it just in big capital letters. Mm-hmm. Which is this fun idea, I guess, of the influence of it in between it sort of being awake or not. in terms of what happens when it gets put back in its cage, it seems like, so here's how I mentally explain the dagger being like a Horcrux, but also wanting to return.
Mm-hmm.
The magic of the daggers being in the ground, I think it's Rose says the ground's like a conductor, or that's the thing that sort of connects to make the fence, has to also be part of the ceremony and runes that are carved into it. So the native peoples put this together because it seems like not only is it a fence, but it is the thing that forces Pennywise to hibernate.
Sure.
Because once they took that thing, once they destroyed it, he was able to sort of unhibernate from his augury. And then once they put it back in the ground, the Deadlights had to sort of rush back into their hibernation period. So the ceremony is man-made or made by the indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
The glass wants to be with itself back at the inflection site because it's part of the macroverse.
Right. The site that we see in it, chapter 2, where it's like the landing site of the meteorite.
Yeah. So it's the glass wants to be at the site, but then it is also part of, it's like if you take part of the essence of the thing you want to enchant and then add an enchantment on top of it.
Yeah. Which is also, I think the questions about the ritual of Chud are interesting, because I could see a scenario where we work our way back to it and one of two things ends up being true. Either the ritual of Chud fails, but the turtle helps the indigenous tribe create this cage, or history is wrong and the ritual of Chud was successful, but its purpose was to create the cage and not destroy the entity.
Yeah, I can see that happening, right? For sure.
Because it's like, in chapter 2, we find out that like the ritual of Chud's kind of BS as far as they know at that point, but it could have been a very real thing. It just may have had a different purpose than what Mike Hanlon is able to discover, hundreds of years later.
Yeah, and there has to be like a sacrificial element to it, and that's why everybody died. I would totally buy that. And then even though everybody's calling it a dagger, I am still very paranoid about it having any sort of power towards it, because we did see at some point in the flashback that it used to just be that dagger and that used to keep the entity at bay, but then it didn't work, and that's why they made the pillars. So at some point it became powerful enough, or they learned something about the dagger where it's like, yeah, if you're holding it, you're going to be like mind poisoned.
Sure.
And to go back to Casey's thing, it does seem like you have to touch it. So I think that's why Rose has it wrapped up in a safe and why Daniel puts it in his bag. It's because I do think it's contact based. That's why the girls have to switch who's holding it. So maybe you don't get mind poisoned if you just have it in a safe.
Yeah. Well, and it also could be like, I think the specific details of the scene where Ronnie is using it to ward off Pennywise is interesting, because he retreats initially when he sees it. And I do think that maybe her wielding it at him in that way and her belief that that is going to save her from him is what forces him to go away. And he never is able to get her, but he is able to grab Marge. So yes, he's able to do something to the person who's not touching the dagger. And so it could be a combination of all of these things. It could be the fact that Ronnie was holding the dagger and believing that it would work that kept her safe, but that didn't necessarily save Marge, or wouldn't have saved Marge. What ultimately saves Marge is Dick Halloran's shine. So I also still would question whether or not the dagger has any true effect over the clown.
And I think it's fun because now the dagger's in play for season 2. Like, we know where it ends up, but we don't know the rest of its story, like the rest of these things.
And this raises another interesting lore question that I have, which is, do you think it's possible that future seasons will include The Shining as part of this story world and as part of this eternal conflict. And do you think that there is a connection, or is there a connection in the texts between the turtle and what gives people the Shining? Like, is the turtle the source of the Shining's power? And is that maybe part of why Dick Halloran is able to use it against the clown?
I always thought that, I mean, maybe the Shining could be part of the power of the turtle. I definitely think that the Shining can be assumed in a lot of stories, Stephen King stories about children, because I think we learn, especially through like Dr. Sleep, that kids are more likely to have access to more of their shine that either gets like dulled or you age out of it. So I do think it's possible, and there have been theories, before any adaptations, that the kids are able to sort of like be the most effective weapon against it in the original timeline because they all sort of shine together. And there are lots of hints in the novel that the turtle is protecting them and that the turtle has brought them together. So it all could be something that's of a similar type. But you're right in that it really depends on if the show thinks The Shining is part of it lore now, as to whether or not it's used psychic wise. I think if we have the Maturin root used on a person with The Shining here, and he's able to sort of like psychically battle it. But then we saw it used on James McAvoy, and he was just sort of like able to like peer through time. So I think they do have, if they have this Maturin root floating around, they do have the capability to have psychic stuff without necessarily doing the shine. And then we do know that they have Juniper Hill for 1935. So they could just have trippy medical psychic stuff, Legion-like, if you will.
Sure.
Without necessarily doing the shine.
Yeah. Or they could have a hospital full of shine kids.
Or they could have a hospital full of shine kids. Like it is, I think all of those things are possible. I think hospital full of shine kids is going to get like 2 Nightmare Before Christmas. Nightmare on Elm Street. 2 different nightmares. Nightmare on Elm Street is the 3 is the one with all the kids in the hospital fighting Freddy. So that's, I think they would want to avoid Dream Warriors, or maybe not. Maybe they love Dream Warriors. But yeah, I think we're gonna have more psychic stuff because the metaphysical stuff is cool. But I am wondering. So the way this season was structured, where we got very metaphysical at the end, but very horror-based at the beginning, I think would be a fun way to sort of base these seasons as they go. So like a big lore shout. We realized it was all about lore at the end, but we are basically still doing a cycle where it awakens, everybody freaks out, and then it ends in an augury. So I think there will be one metaphysical aspect in each season that sort of goes forward. I don't think they're going to keep it The Shining, only because I don't know what you gain by tying it specifically to that one Stephen King book. By being like, it's The Shining, but we aren't going to the Overlook. Like, it's The Shining, but we aren't dealing with Rose the Hat. Like those sort of things. Or you bring in like Rose the Hat, and you're like, oh, we are a half Shining series, and the True Knot is around in the Depression, traveling around eating children, and what happens when the Shining vampires meet the It person. Like they could go in that direction if they want.
Sure.
I think that's mostly what Mike Flanagan's dealing with, trying to do a Dark Tower series. I don't think Welcome to Derry needs to concern itself with that, but they could. If I had like a guess, the way this season was sort of based around like the Black Spot augury, and we know the Bradley Gang massacre is the 1935 augury. And what we know about that is the town kind of rose up and attacked these gangsters. My guess is by next season, by the time we get the attack on the gangsters, we'll be like, oh no, we were really rooting for those gangsters. Like,
those misunderstood mobsters.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be like Sinners, but the Bradley gang are gonna be our cool Michael B. Jordan twins.
Sure.
Like that's, I think, how they're gonna play it.
That would make sense.
And then at the end of the season, they'll be like, oh, and also the dagger never did anything. See you next season when we are gonna rely on the dagger again, but it's a useless MacGuffin. I think that's sort of the direction we're going in. I guess if that's true, and if we're looking at a 3-season arc like we were expecting, given General Shaw's character arc seems to be, I saw a scary thing in 1908 and then I got chomped for underestimating Fear Monster. Do you want to see him in the next 2 seasons, or do you think we got that arc?
I don't think we need him in the next season. But I think he could show up in the 1908 season. Like, I don't think he needs to be there in 1935, because at that point he would have moved away. Right. And begun to forget. And he only then remembers.
If later. He was telling the truth about that.
Yeah.
Of forgetting it all.
So I think that, well, I think it's in the one flashback scene, he also talks about his father being like reassigned. And, he's about to move away anyway. So I think you could do a 1935 season without dealing with Shaw at all, but then bring that character back into the frame for your final 1908 season. We've seen his whole arc. We kind of know, obviously we know how it ends, and I think it's a fairly straightforward arc. So I don't necessarily think there's a whole lot more story to tell there, because I don't even think necessarily that we need to know more about how the military came into this plan, right? It seems pretty straightforward that like Shaw followed his father's footsteps, went into the military, gained a certain amount of prominence, and whether he remembered it the whole time or remembered it later in life, remembered what was going on in Derry and sort of used his 3-star general power to formulate this task force and go and try and do this evil plan to make America fear again. So, I feel like his arc is pretty solidified at this point. In fact, I would hope that the 1935 era is not obsessed with the military, similar to the way like the military is not really involved in the 1980s. I think that it was not as silly as the early reviews painted it to be, and worked out just fine in this season. But I think that you could find a different nefarious group that wants to control or release the entity in 1935. And I think that you could do it in a way, and I think it'd be more interesting if you did it in a way where it's more embedded in like the bedrock of the town, right? Because as we go further back in time, we're also going further back into like the forming of the foundation of Derry, and like the sort of core elements of what make this town. And I think that what we're learning is that not only has Pennywise been there pretty much all along, but he has, because he can see backwards and forwards through time simultaneously, he may have been influencing sort of the way this town has been forming over the 100 years of its existence. So I think that's more interesting than like an outside group constantly coming in and trying to like release the clown. Yeah.
One more observation before we head to some superlatives about the season. I initially, when I first watched this episode, was mad that Hank Grogan is fine and does nothing in this episode besides being worried about Ronnie.
Sure.
Because I thought there was like some questions to answer about Hank, and definitely, like, especially when we just sort of begin this episode and it's like, or when we end this episode and they're like packing up the car and he's like driving out. I'm like, I understood we declared him dead, but you think you'd still want to lay low around Derry until you were, out of the country. And then I realized we didn't really get an answer about how Ingrid and Hank sort of hooked up in the first place. Mm-hmm. And then I remembered that they very distinctively have Ronnie be the only character with a grandparent. Are Hank Grogan and Ingrid Kirsch going to be an item next season?
I mean, like as in they knew each other as kids or as like young people?
Younger people? Because if we have a Grandma Grogan, then that means in theory Grandma Grogan's been here in Derry. You know, if we have generational lines,
sure,
that could be a way to. And we basically have nothing really answered about Ronnie, like we were talking about. She's on that tightrope, and how would you even deal with that? How would you even deal with were Ingrid and Hank really in love with each other? Was Ingrid just manipulating it, trying to talk to her father? If we're going backwards, if those characters didn't like reappear in a season 2.
I think they've conveniently left themselves enough room to do it if they want to do a young Hank and a young Ingrid.
There seems to be a way if you're moving time backwards to sort of like fix mistakes that you made in other things. And so I'm hoping that at the end of these episodes, this is actually a perfect transition. I'm hoping at the end of this episode, or the end of these 3 seasons of Welcome to Derry, I feel better about It Chapter 2, which I definitely do with the post-credit scene, I guess, of this episode. Rest in peace, Joan Gregson, the actress who played elder Miss Kirsch, but sort of looping her in with Sophia Lillis. And we talked about this in The Storm last week, but how Mrs. Kirsch in It Chapter 2 was sort of the thing that didn't make sense in It Chapter 2. And now they sort of like created this scene so that Mrs. Kirsch would be a traumatizing person to Bev. I think was a smart way of fixing part of It Chapter 2. Do you think we're going to fix It Chapter 2 even more by the end of Welcome to Derry Chapter 3?
I mean, I think they could. Well, and I think a lot of it comes back to like if they're able to successfully build out the history, especially the stuff that Mike Hanlon discovers, right, and comes up with, and explain a little bit more about what the reality of that was through showing us the history. I think that would help quite a bit. But I also like the Sophia Lillis cameo. That's fun. Shout out to Sophia Lillis for continuing to cash those HBO checks. She was also really good in The Chair Company recently. But they definitely seem interested in making these ties, not only to direct ties, right? Like the Marge to having her son be Richie, but also, right, we got the Uris family. And I think that's only going to, what this finale suggests is that's only going to continue and intensify as Pennywise goes back. Because if Pennywise's consciousness is sort of traveling backwards, he's going to be looking for these familiar names of these kids. And he's going to be looking to try and like take out Richie's grandpa instead of his mom next time. Or, how can he mess with the family trees of all of these losers that will eventually be the ones that take him down. So I think that's interesting and only ultimately makes parts of It Chapter 2 more important. Go back and right the wrongs of It Chapter 2.
Yeah, I mean, another time around the wheel.
Whatever makes that long ass movie worth it is fine by me.
Hey, if they make 2 more seasons of Welcome to Derry over like the next 6 years, they could go back and they could remake It Chapter 2 with the kid actors from It Chapter 1 and be like, oh, we changed time, and do It Chapter 2 again. Just ping pong back and forth.
I mean, they could probably already do it with Finn Wolfhard. He already looks like he's like 30. So
guess that's true.
They don't even need Bill Hader anymore.
Absolutely. All right, let's transition into The Storm, but don't worry, there aren't going to be any spoilers. We're just going to do some superlatives and have some more fun with the first season, or chapter 1, I'm sorry, of Welcome to Derry.
Well, you got trouble, my friend. Right here, I say trouble right here.
What are you doing in the sewer?
A storm blew me away. Blew the whole circus away.
All right, Neil, who is your on-screen MVP for season 1 of Welcome to Derry?
Well, I think it would be easy to give it to Bill Skarsgård, but that's too easy. I'm going to give it to Chris Chalk as Dick Halloran. He's great. Like it's such a good performance that, as I mentioned last week, I would almost want to continue following this character as he goes off to try his hand at being a cook in the hotel business, because we all know where that leads, and eventually it leads to The Shining. So I think that they did a fantastic job of casting a guy who, feels like he will eventually grow up to be Scatman Crothers. And I think that he delivers a really, really great. I mean, the way he delivers the silliest line of this finale is when Rose turns and is like, what do you see? And he's like, motherfucking miracle. That is the stupidest line of dialogue in this entire season of television. And he makes it work. And that is an MVP worthy performance to me.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would agree with that 100%. Especially with the Bill Skarsgård as the adult runner-up.
Sure.
Definitely. If Skarsgård was around as much as Chris Chalk was in this series, I definitely would have given it to Skarsgård. But because Pennywise only shows up for the last 3 episodes, he just does a lot with a little.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that even though he has less screen time in this season than he does in, say, the 2 movies, this is a better, more evolved version of Pennywise, I think. I think he's taken the character to a new level where, because it works so well here, even in the smaller amount of time, that is how this show will carry forward into multiple seasons, right? Because you don't get Chris Chalk back for a second season. You're going to get a whole new set of Derry denizens. And even if you get some of these characters back, you're getting recast versions of them, right? You're getting, younger version, like a young Rose, or, baby versions of Ingrid, things like that. But you're still going to have Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. So the fact that he's able to elevate his performance even further, I think speaks to this show's potential success in future seasons. So it was important for them to kind of nail that. And I like what they did with Pennywise, both from a design standpoint and performance wise, because I think he becomes much more of a dynamic character here than he was in the movies.
Would you slow play Bill Skarsgård in season 2?
Yeah.
Was that effective, do you think?
I think so. You could almost do a little bit more in season 2, because I think, especially, we'll see about season 1, right? We talked about the season 1 timeline, the 1908 potential timeline, where it's like they're in the summer when they encounter when Shaw and Rose encounter the old man version in the woods. So like, he's not even Bob Gray at that point. And that's the summer, and the augury is like the Easter thing. So there might not even be a lot of Pennywise stuff in a season 1, right? The entity could be manifesting in very different ways. So I think the second season is where you put more Pennywise on screen and have Pennywise be a more active participant in the story. And then the first season is maybe more where Andy Muschietti gets to sort of dive into all of the weird shit that he wants to have the it entity manifest as, because we know he wants
Bob
to
Gray. Bob Gray could still be
and have
a character.
Bill Skarsgård be more Bob Gray. So I think season 2 is actually where season 1 did a really good job of being patient. But a season 2, I think you don't have to necessarily be as patient and deliberate with how you use your Pennywise. And hopefully you get a little bit more budget too. So you'll have more opportunities to do wild stuff.
Yeah. I'm going to give mine to Clara Stack, who
Nice.
gives us 8 episodes of Lily Bainbridge. Just because I think of the weight that she had to carry for like the first 3 episodes as being sort of like our main heroine in this narrative. As we got a bigger universe sort of look at it, and as there was more clown, Lily had less to do as she was sort of being gollumed by the dagger. But that being said, that performance also worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And her sort of freak out being more about self-doubt and less about hating her friends, I think was a clear way to take it. I think Clara Stack screams really well.
Yep.
If I could bring one child actor back, it would probably be her. Run up, obviously, Matilda Lawler, great as Marge. But I do think because of the nature of who Marge ended up being, they had to hide that part of her character as much as possible for the first few episodes as being this person who was trying to please the patty cakes, which I think is a great performance, but I think held her back from the part of her performance I really liked, which was, the Marge Tozier of it all. The self-confident one, the one who was in a relationship with Rich. That character was like Pennywise, only around for a few episodes. So I think, Claire Stack's Lily is probably my favorite of the losers, just because of how well she held this season as being, I think, the primary heroine.
Yeah, for sure.
This is going to be a fun one. What's your best death of the season?
I feel like there's a slam dunk answer for this one, which is young Rich. Who didn't cheer when he got to come back and be part of the finale? But I think that it will go down. Rich saving Marge and his little monologue as he's saving her will go down as a great HBO death, like penultimate episode, big crazy episode where we're getting all of this action around there, and we stop for this really quiet character moment as he does this very heroic thing that the show kind of had been setting up. I mean, we saw it coming. We talked about it in the storm for several weeks leading up to it because, they did that classic TV thing where they're like, we're going to make you really like this character. Right before we kill him off. But it's a really great kid. I would say the second best kid performance in my book. And it's very well executed on screen death. And not the most gruesome, right? Like I feel like there were several, like I actually kind of like the principal getting his head kicked through a window in this finale.
I was having such a good time for the first 5 minutes of this finale.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about last week, are they going to do anything? Are they just going to start with the miss? And immediately they're like, here we go. And then, the principal getting his head ripped off after he's just sort of sticks his hand in his face like a bowling ball and rips his head off is a pretty great death.
I would say that's the most entertaining death, but I mean, when it comes to best overall death, it's definitely Rich.
Yeah. I do like that. However, I'm going to have to give a runner-up, I believe, to Teddy. We thought you'd be a regular Eurus who gets smashed against the glass at the theater by the mutant baby.
It's another gross one.
I just want to give some credit, at least to the first episode, being like, here are these kids. They're all dead now. Welcome to Derry. Just like a very... we have a heart, but we're not going to show it to you until the penultimate episode.
Shout out to Susie, who got her arm ripped off in the first episode.
Yep. And all those characters coming back after making us theorize they were still alive, and then turns out that was a trap for the audience as well as a trap by it. Love it. But I do agree with you. The best death is Richie. I just had to pick a runner up and make it a little bit more splattery. Which brings us to, I guess, this is actually tougher than I would expect it. If you were to ask me about if there's going to be a Welcome to Derry series with the Muschietti's directors of The Flash, what are the best polygons this season, Neil?
I mean, this one, I think has to go to the Maddie in the sewer transition, where they get down in the sewer
rips open.
and he starts singing the song from the trailer. Shout out to the trailer song that's been in our intro this entire season. And Pennywise like pops out of him. I think that's great. Made all the better again by the show's patience for leaving the clown until what was that, episode 6? Episode 5? Yeah, so that's more than halfway through the season they waited to really give the clown. I mean, he showed up a little bit here and there, but you know, even some of the clowns.
Oh, that was his daughter.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we come to find that it wasn't even Pennywise when we thought we were seeing the clowns. So I think a great way to reveal, and I again really like the way that the show really sort of takes off with the Pennywise stuff from that moment. You know, like it's just all clown, full pedal to the metal from episode 5 to episode 8. So yeah, I think that's still great. And again, I think there wasn't even the like very, very digital heavy winged Pennywise in this finale. I don't think there's any version of Pennywise that looked bad in this entire season, which I think is a huge accomplishment, especially on a TV budget. So, because again, they're not working with the same kind of VFX budgets that they were working with in the movies. So I didn't expect it to look that good or better, but you know, they saved the right amount of money for when Pennywise had to get weird.
Absolutely. Mine is one of those weirds, very specifically Pickle Dad in the desk drawer. Just like, what a shot. Every time Pickle Dad comes back, I like him a little bit more. My runner-up would be whatever the abstract is of Pennywise reverting through all of his forms while they sort of peel back into like
that was pretty cool.
Goo wig that flies behind him from this episode. But I think series-wide Pickle Dad in the desk is just like, it's goopy, it moves like it's supposed to, it is shocking, and then as we discussed when it happened, just like the voice is hilarious. That's the one thing that makes me think he's not going to be a character in season 2, is just like, imagine your protagonist talks like this. Oh no, it's the clown. Gotta go to work at the bottling factory. But he looks great though. Pickle Dad looks great.
Hell yeah, I agree.
All right. What is the best or worst adaptation choice of a show that has made tons of adaptation choices? And I think, having been somewhat primed by me telling you all the different things that Hannibal is doing from the Hannibal novels,
sure.
How is this working for you, Neil, as someone who has not read the Clown book?
Well, it's funny because I think I land as the same thing is my best and my worst. And it is the fact that we didn't get to meet the turtle. Because even though we don't get to have a metaphysical scene where someone communes with the turtle god, they did do a lot of teasing it in a fun way. They did lead me down the path far enough to believe that we may eventually get there. And if I have to wait until season 3 to see some brilliant indigenous tribe member take some of that root and commune with a turtle god, I will do it. So I think that's probably it. The other sort of best that I would say is that I really do like, you know, at least as far as what you have explained to me, the way that they have sort of, even though the book is focused on the losers that we saw in the movies, they've repurposed things, marginal details, it sounds like, from the book into potentially main storylines of this show. And I think that this is going to end up being a potentially very good example of how you ultimately have to adapt it. Because, you know, like many a Stephen King property, it's often described as a very difficult to adapt thing. And I have a feeling that's because it's so freaking dense and long and all encompassing in its size and scope. So you kind of have to do 2 movies and 3 seasons of television to get it all in there. So maybe the Muschettis finally did figure it out. They're just doing it the long way. And I like that.
I would say the worst adaptation choice is we are going to capture Pennywise to use on the Russians is a red herring to we're just going to let Pennywise out.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, if you read the book and you're like, what would the military be doing in Derry? Being like that, I think that's not a good adaptation choice. And I think it was executed in a weird way where some weeks I was really into it. And now at the end, I'm just like, if we were just going to get to like a MacGuffin chase by a tree, I don't know if we needed as many twists and turns on the military's plot. Why are there 13 pillars? Why did they tell us how many pillars there were? It doesn't matter.
Well, it's ultimately kind of funny to me too, how by releasing the episodes that they released to the press, that ended up being such a point of contention in the early reviews, and it got people really worked up. Like those of us who didn't have those initial screeners were reading these reviews like, wait, what? They're trying to use them to win the Cold War? This sounds very stupid. Turns out it is stupid, but it also didn't matter.
Yeah. Don't worry about it if it's stupid, because it's not a huge deal like you would think it would be.
Turns out the ultimate plan was to use Pennywise against woke.
Yes. But the best adaptation choice is on its surface making it fourth dimensional, but as a series, bringing back the aspect of like this generational trauma Neil was talking about, this sort of like speaking to different experiences throughout a lifetime or through time. That theme was always lost with adaptations that just had to take it straightforward and do a children's part and an adult part. And then in It Chapter 2, where they tried to thread adult parts with more children parts, we were all like, this is very boring for your 3-hour movie. So we always lost this idea of them being in conversation. I think the best adaptation choice for Welcome to Derry is bringing that aspect back to the story, which is the first time it's been part of an It adaptation that I think, but is definitely in the text, which makes it great. And then, maybe by the time It Chapter 3 is over, we'll be talking about the Dark Tower series or something, and maybe we could all unify these things together.
Sure.
And the Stephen King multiverse will finally be realized.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess as a way out here, Neil, how does this rank on your, what other Stephen King projects did you see this year?
I mean, I saw Life of Chuck.
The Life of Chuck?
Which I liked quite a bit. I still haven't seen The Long Walk.
All right.
What were the other ones?
Running Man and the Monkey?
I literally have the Running Man queued up for like later this week. So I think this is, because I've invested so much time into it. This is easily my favorite, even though I really like Life of Chuck. Life of Chuck is one of my, I would say, top 15 movies of the year at this point, with still pending some screeners to watch. So, and I'm a huge Mike Flanagan fan, so that of course worked for me. But I would say that this season of television accomplished something that was, for me, a fairly high bar, which is making me want to see more of that stupid clown. Right? Like, I'm ready for season 2, whereas, as we've been discussing all along, I don't like clown stuff. I was never really like, I appreciate It Chapter 1, the movie, because of its success, and it's a pretty well executed film. I still don't like the clown stuff in it. It Chapter 2 is very long and I think has plenty of problems. So I was not like super on board for this franchise, but I would say I'm much more on board now because I like the way that they're playing with the lore, and especially with having a lot of problems with the way they executed this finale. I still like what they did with the season, and I'm still into it for a season 2. And I think that specifically for me is a big success for this show, because if this show had kind of laid an egg, I would have been very easily looking for an off ramp from this franchise because I'm not super invested. I've never read the books. I'm not a huge Stephen King acolyte, and I could very easily find other things to do with my time. So I think that makes it a very successful season of television because it has very much invigorated my interest in the It lore. And I'm ready to watch Bill Skarsgård do it again in a second season.
I think you hit it on the head. I think I had a false question. We don't need to rank this against the Stephen King movies because this is something that, like, I guess I wouldn't have expected to compare it to, but it feels a little bit like the first season of Monarch Legacy of Monsters to me, where I showed up being like, here's a dumb monster series.
Sure.
What else do you got? And then it was like, oh, we have these other things. And I was like, oh, you know what? I'm more interested in this series now that you've showed me with these other things than what I assumed I was buying into, which was dumb monster stuff.
Right.
So I'm happy that like it is. Well, yeah, I'm happy that it's a lore horror fantasy series all at once. Like, I'm happy that it's willing to be that ambitious because it could have been just one of those things and probably done okay. And I don't think it had a perfect execution, but it does make me want more Welcome to Derry, which I think was very much a question when this project was announced.
And I would say
why we needed to come back for it.
Looking around on my social media feeds, I am not the only one who feels this way. Like, I feel like it has hooked some people who either haven't really thought about this franchise since the movies came out, or maybe were a little disillusioned after the second movie sort of wore them out. This has really sort of injected quite a bit of energy. And from a creative standpoint, I would rather see the Machetes spend the next, half decade of their creative lives working on this than ever make anything like The Flash again. So.
Oh, you're not a fan of Batman Braving the Bulls
we'll
showing up?
We'll see. But I think they definitely have a more steady hand when it comes to the It franchise than they do their comic book adaptations.
Very, very true. All right. I think that's going to be it. Neil, is there anything we need to touch on before we let people go this week?
No, just make sure you come back next week. Oh, I guess especially if you're listening this far, if you have any questions, comments, or theories or anything you want to lay on us, still hit us up, stormspoilers@gmail.com. We'll take some time next week. We're going to wrap up the whole year, but if you have anything else to say about Derry or want to hit us up with that, feel free to drop it into our inbox and we will discuss it next week.
Hell yeah. We will see you next week for our Star Wars Spoilers year-end special. Until then, go out there, be excellent to each other, and be aware that past, present, and future, it's all the same to little old Pennywise.